In 43 CE, 4 legions under Emperor Claudius landed on the southeastern coast of Britain. They found the coastal settlements of Kent and Essex stacked with Gaulish pottery, Italian wine jars, Mediterranean glass beads, and Baltic amber. The local elites were already comfortable doing business with coinage, the port facilities were already specialized, and the daily trading connections with northern Gaul were already running at high density. Rome didn't build this system. It was already there, and it had been running for nearly 800 years. Every textbook calls 43 CE the moment Britain entered the civilized world. That framing takes a military political event and misreads it as an economic origin point. What actually happened is that Rome took over an infrastructure it had played no part in building, then laid roads on top of it, collected taxes from it, and wrote laws around it. The English Channel is not a barrier. The modern sense of it as something that separates Britain from Europe comes partly from a national myth of insularity that the English themselves constructed in later centuries, and partly from a massive underestimation of ancient seafaring capability. Archaeologists now use the term Channel Corridor, emphasizing connectivity, not division. Between 800 BCE and 43 CE, this stretch of water was one of the busiest trade arteries in all of northwestern Europe. The Bronze Age boat excavated at Dover in 1992 was built somewhere around 1550 to 1300 BCE, making it one of the oldest ocean-going plank-built vessels ever found in Europe. The hull was sealed with moss and animal fat, the planks lashed together with leather strips, and the overall length reached roughly 9.5 meters with an estimated cargo capacity of over 2 tons. The University of Southampton ran experimental reconstruction trials, actually building a replica using the same techniques and sailing it across the channel under real sea conditions. It worked. This was not a fishing boat. It was a freighter. By the middle of the first millennium BCE, this boat-building tradition had converged with the maritime technology of the Veneti, a seafaring people of the Brittany Peninsula. Julius Caesar later described their vessels in his Gallic Wars, high-sided, leather-sailed, with iron anchor chains, built for the heavy swells of the Atlantic. The fusion of these two traditions pushed open water cargo capacity further upward, with single crossings potentially moving several tons of goods at a time. Channel crossings did not mean charging straight out into open water. The dominant mode was coastal cabotage, staged hops along the shoreline, with vessels moving between a series of small landing points and exchange stations, each leg short enough to complete in a single day. The southern English coast and northern French coast were both dense with these stopping points. Archaeologists have identified multiple Iron Age landing sites along the Kent shoreline through assemblages of tools, pottery fragments, and animal bone that match the profile of short-stay commercial activity rather than permanent settlement. Crossings ran on a seasonal calendar. Summer's stable southwest winds provided the reliable conditions needed to make the trip predictable. A collaborative project between the University of Southampton and the French Institute of Oceanography reconstructed the North Atlantic Oscillation Index for the late Iron Age period, using that climate data to calculate optimal crossing routes and viable time windows for each season. What this means in practical terms is that the merchants making these crossings 2,000 years ago knew exactly when to leave and which route to take. This was not adventure. It was a scheduled logistics operation. If one commodity represents the material foundation of this entire trading system, it is tin. Bronze requires both copper and tin deposits in continental Europe are extremely limited. The southwestern corner of Britain, modern Cornwall and Devon, holds some of the highest grade tin ore in Europe. That geological fact is what determined Britain's strategic position in the northwestern European trade network in the first place. Research published in 2025, synthesizing isotope data from multiple mining sites, confirmed that southwestern British tin was already the core node of a long-distance supply chain extending across Western Europe during the late Bronze Age. In 2019, Ernst Pernicka's team at the University of Frankfurt published a study in the journal Antiquity using tin isotope fingerprinting to track the origin of tin ingots found at multiple Eastern Mediterranean Bronze Age sites. The chemical signatures matched Cornwall. This was the first time laboratory data placed southwestern Britain and the eastern Mediterranean in the same supply chain on the basis of hard chemical evidence rather than textual inference. Cornwall's tin was not circulating regionally. It was going all the way to the other end of the known world. Copper from the mining districts of Western Ireland entered the Channel trading network by sea, converging with Cornish tin at relay nodes along the Brittany and Normandy coasts before moving outward as finished bronze objects. Historic England's Channel Bronze Age cross-border research project, launched in 2021, systematically compared the metal compositions of bronze objects from sites on both sides of the channel and confirmed direct exchange of raw materials and finished products between workshops on both shores. The smelting detail analysis showed that some continental workshops were drawing their tin from sources matching the Cornish signature, rather than scattered local deposits. Salt is another bulk commodity that has been chronically underestimated. Salt production sites at Kimmeridge in Dorset and comparable locations show evidence of large-scale output being shipped across the channel to the continent for meat preservation. Salt is not a luxury item. It is a basic input in food production and storage, and its large-scale cross-channel movement shows that this trade network had penetrated down to the foundational layer of daily economic life, not just the gift exchange circuits of the upper tier. Kimmeridge shale was also worked into bracelets and vessels, and objects made from it appear at sites across southern England and northern France, forming an independent light industrial trade stream running in parallel. Between roughly 500 and 100 BCE, the count of high-status metal objects in the archaeological record drops. The traditional interpretation is that trade contracted. That interpretation is wrong. What contracted was the portion of trade we can see. What actually happened was a structural shift in the commodity mix. Lipid analysis of ceramic vessels from southern English sites has detected residues of Mediterranean olive oil, plant biomarkers from North African dried fruits, and tannin compounds consistent with Gaulish leather processing. These organic cargoes left almost no physical trace above ground, but they survived as chemical signatures in the inner walls of the pots that once held them. Between the 3rd and 2nd centuries BCE, Armorican pottery produced in Brittany appears in large quantities at sites in Dorset. The volume is sufficient to rule out casual or accidental transfer. This was systematic, sustained commercial import. The route it traveled bypassed the narrower eastern section of the channel entirely, connecting southwestern Britain directly to northwestern France without passing through any political control point in between. Researchers describe this as a proto-free trade zone pattern. No intermediate toll takers. Merchants connecting directly with merchants. Cunliffe's excavations at Hengistbury Head recovered over 2,000 fragments of Armorican pottery. That number is itself a statement about trade volume. Amber's journey is harder to trace because it began further away. Baltic amber contains succinic acid, a chemical marker that distinguishes it from Mediterranean imitations. Systematic Fourier transform infrared spectroscopy testing of amber excavated from British sites has confirmed that the majority of samples contain succinic acid, meaning they genuinely originated in the Baltic rather than being locally sourced substitutes. Britain's southern communities were therefore participating in a supply chain that ran from the Baltic coast through Central Europe down to the Channel and across, with multiple handoff nodes in between that remain only partially identified. Glass bead distribution follows a similarly complex pattern. The colored glass beads of the Middle and Late Iron Age found in Britain, predominantly blue and yellow, have been traced to 2 distinct sources through compositional analysis. Some originate from Eastern Mediterranean workshops, others from Gaulish production centers that then re-exported to Britain. Matthew Ponting's team at Cambridge applied combined lead isotope and trace element analysis to samples from multiple sites and established direct supply relationships between British consumers and Gaulish glass workshops. Not diffusion through cultural contact, direct commercial sourcing with a chemical paper trail. Evidence for organic cargo has been accumulating rapidly over the past few years, driven by advances in paleoproteomics and organic residue analysis. Storage vessels from coastal sites in Hampshire and Kent have yielded beeswax and beeswax degradation products on their interior surfaces, with vessel forms closely matching northern French parallels. Honey is a high-value, shelf-stable cargo usable as a preservative, fermentable into mead, and medicinally applicable. It is exactly the kind of product that makes sense to ship across open water. Strabo, writing in the 1st century BCE, lists honey among Britain's primary exports in Book IV of his geography. Chemical analysis and ancient text are pointing at the same conclusion from opposite directions. The University of York's team applied strontium isotope analysis to dental enamel from animal bones excavated at port sites and found that some cattle showed strontium ratios inconsistent with British bedrock geology, but consistent with the geology of northern Gaul. This is currently the most direct available evidence for the cross-channel movement of live animals or animal products. Loading live cattle onto a vessel under 10 meters long and crossing the open channel is a logistically complicated operation. The economic incentive driving that behavior had to be substantial. After roughly 100 BCE, the scale of channel trade underwent a step change that is clearly visible in the archaeological record. The defining feature of this period is the emergence of specialized trading emporia, not just landing beaches but organized commercial hubs with warehousing infrastructure. Hengistbury Head in Dorset is the most thoroughly studied example. Its import list includes Dressel 1 Italian wine amphorae, high-quality glassware, purple dye extracted from Murex sea snails, and fine Gaulish ceramics. Geophysical survey using magnetometry and resistivity measurement, conducted in recent years, revealed that the site extends considerably further than Cunliffe's original excavation boundaries, and includes what appear to be deliberately planned storage areas. This was not a spontaneous market. It was a designed commercial facility. On the French side of the water, the underwater survey of St. Malo Bay in 2022 uncovered what appear to be late Iron Age anchor stones and timber wharf structures. The INRAP excavations at the Alet site, near modern St. Malo, have produced import assemblages directly linked to British trade. The physical port infrastructure on both sides of the channel is now producing corroborating material evidence. These were not isolated outposts. They were matched pairs of nodes in a bilateral system. Wine is the single commodity that most vividly demonstrates trade volume in this period. Dressel 1 amphora sherds at southern English sites now count in excess of 20,000 fragments across known assemblages, distributed from the coast deep into the interior. The Oxford team of Elaine Morris and Chris Gosden ran gas chromatography, mass spectrometry analysis on locally made vessels from southern English sites and detected wine tartrate residues inside them, meaning imported wine was decanted into local containers and continued circulating in local consumption networks. The implication is twofold. Import volume was high enough to reach everyday consumption rather than sitting in elite display contexts, and British communities were actively absorbing a foreign product into their own domestic material culture. The ceramic trade ran at comparable scale. Wheel-thrown pottery from northern Gaul poured into southeastern Britain, with density dropping off from Kent and Essex toward the interior in a gradient that maps the geographic reach of the trading network directly onto the distribution plot. The Joint Provenance Project, launched by the British Museum and the Musée d'Archéologie Nationale in 2021, ran neutron activation analysis and X-ray fluorescence on nearly 400 vessel samples and began building geochemical reference groups for specific Gaulish production centres. The surprise finding, a portion of vessels previously classified as British local imitations turned out, by their chemistry, to be direct Gaulish imports. That reclassification pushes the real import total higher than previous estimates. Around 150 BCE, Gaulish gold coins began appearing in circulation in southern Britain, and local minting of imitative coins in gold and silver followed. Coinage does not emerge from nowhere. It is the institutional response to a trading relationship that has matured to the point where a standardized accounting unit reduces transaction costs enough to justify the infrastructure of its production. The Portable Antiquities Scheme database now holds tens of thousands of late Iron Age coins. Spatial analysis by John Creighton at Cambridge and John Naylor at University College London shows that coin density peaks precisely in the southeastern coastal zones with the heaviest cross-channel contact. Trade density and monetary density map onto each other. Philip de Jersey at the University of Sussex published analysis in 2023 of several mixed gold and silver hoards from the southern English coast, finding a statistical correlation between the composition ratios of those hoards and the geographic distance from known port sites. His interpretation, merchants buried their liquid assets before departure as spatial risk isolation. Assets stay in the ground on shore, the merchant goes to sea, and if the crossing goes wrong, the capital survives. This is risk management practice. It predates the existence of banks by 2,000 years, and it is recoverable from the archaeological record. The cross-channel comparison of coin fineness and die linking patterns also reveals a shared monetary vocabulary operating across the water, a trust-based credit network built through repeated transactions between people who knew each other's word was good. Two competing models dominate the debate over who was actually running this system. The elite competition model holds that cross-channel trade was monopolized by tribal leadership, the purpose being to secure rare prestige goods that could reinforce social authority. This model accounts for high-value object circulation, but cannot explain why bulk commodities, salt, grain, or livestock, were also moving at scale. Nobody builds a cross-channel logistics network just to move a few wine jars. The market-driven model, now the mainstream position, argues that the Channel Zone had developed an informal market ecosystem in which mid-level traders collected and redistributed surpluses for profit, with trade operating on internal economic logic rather than political direction. The spatial evidence for the market-driven model lies in how sites are distributed. A politically centralized system would produce a clear core-periphery hierarchy, dominant hub, dependent satellites. What the actual archaeological distribution shows is a multi-node network, exchange stations of comparable scale distributed along both coastlines, with no single dominant center. Tom Broomans at the University of Surrey used network analysis methods to model the data and identified several high-connectivity hub sites, but their dominance scores fell far short of what a core periphery model would predict. The pattern fits venture maritime trading, low entry barriers, individual merchants, or small crews running small vessels between nodes on their own account, absorbing their own risk. The concept of cross-channel communities has emerged in recent scholarship to describe the structural linkage zone that formed between southern England and northern Gaul through sustained long-term interaction. The concept drew support from a 2024 study published in Nature that combined ancient genomic data with archaeological site distributions to show continuous cross-channel population movement during the Iron Age. But the researchers' core point was about interaction intensity rather than migration. The synchronous appearance of specific object assemblages and consumption practices on both sides of the water indicates that merchants were carrying behavioral repertoires across the channel, along with their physical cargo. The Portable Antiquities Scheme database is the infrastructural context that makes recent research breakthroughs possible to understand. By 2023, this citizen science platform operated by Britain's museum network had registered over 1.5 million objects discovered and reported by metal detector users, with late Iron Age coins and metalwork making up a substantial portion. That data volume allows statistical analysis of trade object spatial distribution at a scale impossible to achieve from professional excavation samples alone. Layering GIS spatial analysis over this dataset makes the geographic structure of trade networks directly visible on a map, rather than inferable only through theoretical modeling. Underwater archaeology's digital acceleration is equally significant. The Joint Channel Underwater Heritage Project has integrated detection data from both Britain and France into a geographic information database containing several hundred candidate underwater sites, with multiple suspected Iron Age cargo vessels currently under investigation by remotely operated vehicles. Once confirmed, these wrecks will provide direct evidence for vessel types, cargo assemblages, and route distributions that coastal land sites simply cannot supply. The channel seabed's low oxygen conditions have preserved organic material, wooden hull planking, rope, cordage, that would have been gone within decades under terrestrial conditions.